This is a Glenfarclas family cask. This is a 38-year-old whiskey from your birth year, 1969, which is pretty cool. This bottle is one of 121.
Wait, it's actually 38 years old? That's me.
It's your actual age?
Yeah,
That's amazing. Yeah, that's why I brought it.
Dude, you gave me that idea, and I've used that for like wedding gifts and birthday gifts and stuff. It's so cool to be able to go on and say, it's somebody's 30th birthday, 40th birthday, 50th birthday, getting them a bottle from that year. It stands out.
And that's actually how we've gotten so many customers too, is when someone's really successful or does really well and has everything that they want, you can get everything. But getting that birth year bottle, man, that's so cool. I was born on that year. It's like time travel.
It's the first time drinking on the show. So I'm popping my drinking cherry.
Cheers.
Cheers. Love you, brother. It's a unicorn. Smooth. Welcome to the Early Podcast, where I interview the builders behind the world's most iconic companies. I'm Max Crowley. I was Uber's 25th employee and spent years scaling one of this generation's wildest rides. Each week, I sit down with the early innovators who really made it all happen. So please, tune in, like the show, subscribe, tell your friends, keep coming back. Let's go.
I'm Phil Mikhaylov. I joined Uber in 2014. Now I founded a company called Unicorn based out of Chicago.
Phil Mikhaylov, my guy. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
It's good to see you in New York.
You too.
You were at Fox doing a live, like, national feed interview. It's insane.
Just on Varney & Co. A lot less intimidating than this. But yeah, this is awesome. And I'm super excited. Your pod episodes have been great.
I appreciate you. Dude, your story is crazy. You're born in St. Petersburg, Russia. Your family comes to the United States when you're a baby. You have nothing. They have nothing. You're living in like a studio apartment in Chicago with like relatives. Your dad's delivering pizzas. That's at least how I know the story. What is the story? And what did you take from that just wild American dream experience?
I was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, and the Soviet Union collapsed in the 90s. And my parents fled as refugees, along with hundreds of thousands or, almost millions of people during that time. I was super young, but looking back, it was, really all the immigrant values were just instilled in me as a kid. And so we came here, I was almost 2, and we moved 7 people into a 1-bedroom. My parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and my aunt. And both my parents were super young when they had me. My mom was 20. My dad was 22. He was in medical school. And then life hit him really quick when we moved here, and he became a Domino's pizza driver.
A little bit different than doing medical school.
Yep, exactly. But, needed to figure out a way to make money for the family. Pizza, I think the whole family put together $700 so that he could buy a car. And my mom was bussing tables at a little Indian restaurant called Sabri Nihari, which is still around in Chicago. And she was doing night school, going to medical school. And yeah, my dad was doing whatever he can to get money and food for the family.
When did you sort of realize as a kid, like maybe you guys were different than other people that you were growing up around?
Probably when I was like 12, when we moved. And, I think we moved probably 7 times as I was a kid all around Chicago. But when we immigrated here, all the former Soviet Union countries, Ukraine, Belarus, etc., a lot of the folks that I grew up with, many who all grew up in the same neighborhood. So it just felt normal. That just felt like what life was like. And it wasn't until we moved to the suburbs and my parents got a little bit more established and created a career for themselves, etc., that I really realized, wow, this is so different. So for me, moving from one school to another just felt normal. My parents, I'm sure, was totally different. Looking back, it is pretty crazy. We think about our problems or, daily problems that I have, but I'm like, my parents came here with absolutely nothing, and just seeing the journey that they had. And my grandpa, who was a radiologist and then ends up working in a factory here in Chicago. Now, it's like pretty amazing to see the life that they've created. But I think a lot of those values and just like seeing how they're living life along with everyone else that I grew up with and their parents hustling to try to figure out how to make it in America probably made me a lot of who I am today.
No doubt. And you are a hustler. It says hustler in the dictionary. Your picture is there. When do you think you developed that skill set and that hustle that has really propelled you throughout your adult life?
I mean, looking back, it is funny being introspective. I did so many things as a kid to hustle for $1. I did garage sales. I started a sports memorabilia business in high school. I would find any way to like flip something to make money. And what that really taught me now looking back is like, I was so comfortable with the no, people rejecting me or people saying no. And like, I always got this like, thrill of turning a no into a yes. And so I felt like, later in life that helped me a lot in the various roles that I had and companies that where I would just be kind of ruthless and going out and doing stuff. When I was like probably 12, 13 is when I started figuring out how to make some money for myself and wasn't really relying on my parents.
You ended up at the University of Arizona. You graduated from there. What was the plan when you graduated? You ended up at Freebie with our friend Hank. You did some real estate stuff kind of right out of school. What did that all sort of look like?
I had this amazing plan coming out of school that I was like, okay, I'm going to graduate and get this amazing job. My parents, all they wanted for me was stability, for me to get a $50,000 job out of school, live in an apartment and have the true American dream, work at an Accenture or something like that.
Get the 401k, put the money away.
Which is so funny because it's such the antithesis of like what they did. I think that they probably saw how hard life was and they just wanted it to be easier for me. And so out of school, I went into real estate. I, would read a lot about successful people. They did real estate. I thought that's what I wanted to do, was cold calling 400 or 500 people a week, trying to flip real estate. And to be honest, I hated it. Everyone that was at the company that I was at, which was called Marcus and Millichap, it just felt like a dying industry and not one that I wanted to be a part of. And yes, you can be very successful in it, but I just felt like I wasn't learning and I wasn't maximizing my own potential. And I called on this one guy who owned a property and his name was Ben. He was the founder of Freebie. And he's like, why don't you come to my office? And I came to his office. And he was like, here's my whole book of real estate. This is what I need you to focus on. I'm starting this business called Freebie. And I said, what's that? And he's like, don't worry about that. Focus on the real estate. And I was like, well, I'm really interested in this startup thing. So I joined Freebie and convinced him to give me a job. Freebie was, honestly, looking back at it, way ahead of its time. It was a really great idea. It was the idea of social currency. You connect all your social networks together and you can pay for experiences and food items in exchange for a social post. It was an amazing experience, but the founders didn't have startup experience. And so that's what I thought a startup was. I got introduced to you and, was obsessed with the idea of Uber for a variety of reasons, but I would go to all these incubators and see all these companies. And then I started to understand what real talent looks like and what funding looks like and what great investors look like. And those are just things that we didn't have at Freebie, but it was some of the most fun that I had. And so even with limited funding, limited resources, was still able to accomplish a lot. And one of the early partnerships that I signed was with Uber. And it was ahead of the launch of Uber X. We did it at the Four Seasons. And I just remember having the Chicago team come there, spending time with those folks, and just was so energized by that team and what they're building. And, I just knew that, I wanted to leave Freebie and join Uber.
Yeah, you see kind of the crazy scrappiness of something really starting from scratch in Freebie and kind of having a market, but maybe not quite sure what they were exactly or how to make it happen. Awesome guys, great concept. And then you're able to be like, all right, but can I get on this rocket ship at Uber, really learn what it takes, really see it in action, and then see where it goes from there. All right, so you get in the interview process with Uber. It's daunting. We put you through the ringer, and it was partly because I was like, I don't know if I totally trust this guy. Luckily, we're here, whatever, 10 plus years later sitting here. What was the interview process like? And what do you kind of where is your head at this point?
The interview process was, it was intense, but, they put me through a handful of interviews, a creative exercise. And then the final step was going into this tiny room with 1,000 iPhones behind me and there's cords everywhere. And they said, someone's going to show up and interview you in here. And so, I waited in that room for 30 minutes and I was so nervous, but looking back at it, I understood what was happening. It was so scattered at Uber and so early stage and they were figuring out the process themselves. Yeah, I kept jumping through hoops and trying to get to the next step and the next step. And along the way, I kept, doing whatever I could to get onto the good side of employees. And so I would give them credits to Freebie. I would give them tickets. I would take them to lunch. I would take them out to dinner. I was just trying to do whatever, but there was one blocker, which was you. And I know that you really had your doubts about me joining, but I didn't care what it took to get there. And it was just one of those persistence things, like turning a no into a yes. And, looking back at it, the final interview was with Andrew McDonald, who's now the president and COO. And man, I was just like so excited to have the opportunity. And then when I joined, that's where really the imposter syndrome hit.
Yeah. So the imposter syndrome hits because you get there and you're like, everybody's an ex-consultant and a banker. I think you called it like a McKinsey reunion.
Yeah.
How do you overcome that?
So everyone was a McKinsey, Bain, Accenture employee, or maybe they worked early at Twitter or something like that.
And you're sort of an immigrant kid, hustle.
Yeah. And I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I was almost embarrassed to say, I went to the University of Arizona. And so I remember my first week on the job and my first month on the job. But my first week, there was this like guerrilla marketing exercise. And they're like, okay, here's an iPad, go to Wrigley Field, and whoever can get 50 signups on the street, meaning people had to input their credit card on the spot. I mean, going up to a random and having a tablet and asking them to put their credit card in and get signed up for Uber. And I just remember that a lot of those folks didn't want to do that. And they were really great at Excel spreadsheets and modeling and thinking through operational systems, but they just didn't have that hustle, maybe in other ways, but not in terms of like being relentless and going on the street. And so I wanted to do whatever I could to get my name on the leaderboard. And so I remember within a couple hours, I got 50 signups, and then even employees that I worked with to just gain their respect who had zero desire to go and do this. I took their iPads and I just started getting signups for them. And I started winning over some of the folks that I worked with. And I think that was a great way. And then the next, memory of that, of just getting over the imposter syndrome, was Lyft became an entrenched competitor. And there was a challenge called slogging, which was kind of crazy looking back.
The infamous slogging.
The infamous slogging. And so, there was a challenge of who can get the most Lyft drivers to sign up exclusively for Uber. And so Uber at the time had these neon drawstring bags. And every single night I would put in 30, 40 phones into the bag and just ride for 3-4 hours. There was the Slack channel or our Uber internal chat at the time. And every time I would just be in the Lyft and then converting these guys and convincing them to join. I ended up winning the challenge and it was pretty awesome. But I felt like the first month really just showed that I could hustle. And, maybe I couldn't outsmart a lot of folks, but I could out hustle a lot of folks. And so I think that just kind of got my respect from some of my peers and then allowed me to really like thrive in some of the early day Uber initiatives.
And you got a free dinner at Alinea.
I got a free dinner at Alinea. Pretty epic.
I mean, it's pretty crazy to look back and think about slogging and the fact that we were out there one by one converting Lyft drivers into Uber drivers and how important that was. I mean, I had a guy from Lyft on the pod and he was talking about how it was just like demoralizing for them that every time they would bring a driver on, they would eventually get converted to Uber. It's pretty crazy.
It got so fun to the point where I'm like racking up dozens of drivers every single week. And I would convince them, let me grab the mustache, because they used to have that little mustache. And so like I had like a bag full of mustaches and coming back to the office. And it just felt like, very warlike of like, how many of these guys can I get onto our side? But it was awesome. And I do know that it really did benefit the company. We needed more drivers. The number of rides were going through the roof. And it also felt awesome being like, here's a phone, get on, and you're going to get a guaranteed $1,000 this week if you take 10 trips or whatever it was. So yeah, I feel like I still kind of chase that high and I want to instill that, type of mentality into my team.
I know. It's crazy. I also kind of continue to look for that high of the original, just being able to slang Uber to an individual person. They didn't know what it was. It's the coolest thing ever. You're getting them pumped about it. It's hard to recapture that magic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for you, because you are such a hustler, but obviously you wouldn't have had the success that you've had without also being incredibly strategic. When do you think that flipped for you where you're like, I'm not just a hustler. I'm also strategic. I can also make other things happen. I mean, now you're obviously, founder and CEO of a company. When did that switch for you?
I think that the deals just kept getting more complicated. In the beginning, going out and getting someone to sign up for Uber and hustling and doing that is very different than doing a partnership with a music festival. That's when you need legal involved and ops and BD and sign off and finance. And so it was baby steps leading up to it, from doing a very small partnership with a restaurant to signing some of the largest deals on Uber Eats. It really was just a journey to understand how it works. In my mind, I always knew, I could sign a partnership with Dunkin' Donuts, or I could sign, this partnership with X Music Festival. But it just took time to really understand how that could happen. And so I think the turning point that, really was during my Uber Eats time. I was launching Uber Eats. And I was in Canada and the East Coast. And one of the early partnerships was with McDonald's. It was the pilot partnership. That one was like, 20 locations. It was a big deal. Originally, the model for Uber Eats was to go after the first 100 restaurants that are on Yelp in a city. Chains was not part of the strategy. And at that point, that's where like the BD team got involved and really helped scale that partnership. And in my mind, I was like, I can do that. But I really didn't understand what that meant. And so at that moment, I just learned from some of the great folks like Liz and other folks, Carla, et cetera, that worked on some of these deals. And then I really understood the complexity of, navigating legal and that some of the, T&Cs of the deals and the deal points and how to make that happen. But I think signing a deal is one thing. Executing a deal and getting it live is a whole other thing.
Yeah, actually implementing it, actually standing it up, actually operationalizing
it. I took a lot of learnings from you too, of early days hustling to getting Uber for Business as a real standalone business off the ground and just seeing like what it takes to execute. One of the strong points of me is like I really pride myself on relationships and building friendships and within the workspace to be able to get what I want to get done. And so I think whether it's legal, product, engineering, BD, et cetera, operations, being able to get that whole unit bought into your bigger vision and to actually bring something to life. And so, one of the first like big deals that I did was an Uber Eats deal. And I felt like that was kind of the turning point where once I got that first one, I just kept going. And then eventually at GoPuff, doing a deal with Uber and Chase and Hyatt and a bunch of other partners just gave me the confidence that I know how to do these deals at this point.
Yeah, you did a deal with Snickers, I think, relatively early on in your career.
That really was the turning point. Thanks for reminding me. That was such an awesome campaign. I went on to, I believe Snickers is owned by Mars. So I went on to like Mars.com and I went onto the info page and I typed up just like a quick pitch of what I wanted to do for Uber Costumes on Demand. And that campaign was pretty viral and it was amazing and it got a lot of news coverage. But the whole idea was, if we can deliver food or at the time, if we can deliver experiences or whatever it was, Halloween's right around the corner. What if we deliver costumes to people, last minute costumes? And so I remember Snickers reaching out, like a rep from their team, and we got on and they're like, this is awesome. Like, how much is something like this going to cost? And I was like, let me get back to you and we have to model it out. And at that point, we didn't have like a team to model it out. I didn't know how much this would cost. So I said, it's going to be $150,000. I just like pulled the number out of my ass and they're like, oh, okay. Yeah. Let's go with it. And I was like, I probably could have gotten way more, but like, that was a cool thing too, is just like convincing people to pay to use the Uber platform. And, there's other examples of that when I did that with like Pedialyte for after St. Patty's Day, this like hangover kit that was delivered. And same thing at that point, I was like $250 and they're like, oh yeah, okay, great. And I was like, man, like having the Uber cachet and asking for money, like people are willing to pay to partner with you. But that was a moment that was like really cool. And I just remember the full team assembly line, packing costumes in there, having a third party company give us all the costumes. There were inflatable bananas and Snickers, and all the cars on that day of Halloween were actual Snickers bars. And so getting engineering and product involved with that was pretty cool. So yeah, that was a really exciting time, but I felt like that also just, was the next step into like, okay, I can get money from someone. I can work at a small scale. How does this work at the global level?
Yep. I now know how to ask for money. I'm not weird about it. Then you end up in India. Crazy. Very different than anything you had done to that point. How does that come about? And what's like sort of the first thought going on in your mind in those first couple of weeks as you're walking around India?
So there was an email that was sent, I believe, by Andrew McDonald or Alan Penn. And it was, a program that they were saying, hey, they're launching Uber India and they're looking for 5 people to volunteer. And I don't think that many people submitted their name and application. Immediately, I replied and said, I want to be a part of this. And within 5 days, I was on a flight to Mumbai, India. And I remember just like landing in Mumbai, India. And I called my parents and told my now wife, it was my girlfriend at the time, I'm going to India. They were super supportive and excited. I thought I would land there and there's going to be like some guy with a sign that says like Mr. Mikhaylov, as if I'm a consultant at like McKinsey. And I remember calling someone and I was like, hey, I'm here. Like, what do I do? And they're like, we sent you there to figure it out. Like, just get a taxi and go and figure it out. And so I walked outside of the airport and this guy threw my luggage on top of his car and starts tying it. And there's no AC in this taxi. There's 2 lines. It says AC, no AC. I didn't actually know what that meant. I thought that was like an Indian term, which just meant air conditioning. And so I just remember going in there and then the next day was Holi, which is like a massive holiday. And it was my birthday on the same day. And so, yeah, I get to the hotel and then immediately I was waiting for like the assignment of where I'm going. And I thought it would be a great city like New Delhi, or I get to stay in Mumbai. And they're like, you're going to Calcutta. And I was like, what's that? I've only seen that in Basketball, if you remember that movie. And so
the South Park cast.
Yeah. And so I went to Calcutta, and, there was one employee there at the time. And I just remember going to his apartment, and he lived with his parents and his grandparents. And it's a very cultural thing. But it also kind of reminded me of how I grew up. And it was pretty cool. Like, we're working in his living room, and his grandma's bringing us like chai masala, and we're just jamming on like, okay, how are we going to get drivers on the road? What's the plan here? India was, really amazing. And it was such a privilege. And I didn't realize like how great of an opportunity it was at Uber. Like, times were hard there, but it's like they're giving you keys to the kingdom. You have all the resources behind you to go out there and figure it out. But yeah, I think like that was really amazing. And I wish I appreciated it much more in the moment, but I was also 24 years old, and I was just like, what is this place? This is absolutely nuts. How is this business going to get started? Ultimately, it's a long story, but was able to figure out how to get Uber live in Calcutta. And it was a really amazing experience.
How much time did you end up spending over?
A year. It was supposed to be 6 months, ended up asking to stay another 6 months. And, really crazy story during my time in Calcutta. I remember we got the first 2 cars launched on Uber. And Uber X there was very different. So Uber X there, just because of the way that the caste system works and everything like that, it was very, similar to the taxi industry here. There's one kingpin who owns, 20 cars or 100 cars, and then he puts drivers in the road, and he's paying them $3, $5 a day to drive his cars. And so we'd have to find these kingpins and convince them. And we were paying $1,000 US for every car that was on the road. If they accepted 25 trips, you had an unlimited, war chest of money to go out and spend. And I remember we got the first 2 cars launched, or the first 2 drivers launched, and I tried ordering an Uber from the hotel. And traffic in India is absolutely nuts. And later we ended up launching Uber Rickshaw and Uber Cash, just because the dynamics of that market is totally different. But the cars, you would wait sometimes 45 minutes for like a car to come. And someone that we hired as like a recruiting agency invited us to go to a cricket game called the Calcutta Knight Riders. Huge team. I've never been to a cricket match. And I remember I tried to order an Uber. He canceled on me. Next guy, 45 minutes waiting in traffic. And I was like, I'm not going to make it to this game. And I see this guy coming out of the hotel, and he's dressed pretty sharp. I'm staying at a nice hotel, and he's wearing the logo of the Calcutta Knight Riders. I said, sir, are you going to the match by any chance? And he was like, yes. And I was like, do you mind if I pay for your car to take me to the match? And he was like, pay for my car? Like, I was like, yeah. Like, I'll give you money and just drop me off at the match. And he's like, just come with me. And a Mercedes pulls up. And in India, like, a Mercedes is like non-existent. And so we get in the car, and this guy and his wife start just grilling me with questions. What are you doing in Calcutta? Why are you here? And I was like, I'm here to launch Uber. Have you guys ever used Uber? And one of the awesome perks of being, early at Uber was dropping people credits. And I was like, give me your number right now, both of you. And they're like, yeah, we've used it in London. We've used it in New York. And I was like, I'm going to give you some
rubles, whatever
they give you some rupees. And I dropped a bunch of credit onto their accounts. And they're asking me all these questions. And they're like, are you a fan of cricket? I'm like, it's my first time. I'm like, how about you guys? And they're like, oh, we have to be. And I'm like, why? They're like, because we own the team. And this guy, his name was Jai Mehta, and his wife is Juhi Chawla. She's like the biggest Bollywood actress, and their partner, this guy Shah Rukh Khan. And so he goes, where are you sitting? And I show him the text, and it was like some free seats at the game. And he's like, why don't I just take down your number, and you'll come sit in our box. And this felt like, I get to the stadium, they text me, they're like, someone's going to come get you into our box. I come there, it felt like 10 Jerry Joneses in one person. Shah Rukh Khan is the most famous person legitimately in the world, has hundreds of millions of followers. And so we get there, and they introduce me to everyone. They're like, he's launching Uber in Calcutta. He's launching Uber in Calcutta. They thought it was the coolest thing. And I'm asking all these people, like, what do you do for work? And they're like, oh, I'm in entertainment. That meant they're in Bollywood, but I didn't know who they were. And then the match ends, and I remember Shah Rukh Khan and Juhi Chawla going onto the field, and they're waving their hand, and everyone's like, Shah Rukh Khan, Shah Rukh Khan, just freaking out. And that evening, they're like, how are you getting back? I'm like, I was going to get an Uber, but there's no way. And they're like, just come back with us to the hotel. I have dinner with the team and with the owners. And the next morning, I remember coming to the office, which was the apartment. And I was telling them, they're like, so how's the game? Did you have fun? I was like, yeah, I was with this guy, Shah Rukh Khan. And they were like, you were with Shah Rukh Khan? And I was like, yeah, why? And they're like, Phil, that's the most famous person in. So I stayed in touch with them. That made the whole India experience so epic because at that point, I was able to stay in touch with some of these folks that I met. And as we launched other markets, other cities, it was just like an awesome connection to have and to eventually do a partnership with them. So
unbelievable. Did you tell them about Unicorn or anything?
No. Well, actually, yeah, I just recently texted Jai Mehta about because he enjoys wine. And I remember my wife and father-in-law now flew out for his 50th birthday and I wanted to do a really nice dinner and he loves wine. So I asked him if he can help me get a bottle of wine and a reservation at a place in Mumbai. And it was pretty epic, but they paid for the bottle and they paid for the full dinner and set this like amazing dinner up. And like hospitality in India was next level. But that was so epic. And like, after that, the progression of getting Uber launched and having more folks join the team. And the mission was find a GM in every market, hire an ops manager, hire a marketing manager, get the business up and running. And then you go to the next city and just keep replicating until there's actual traction on the business. And so I met a lot of great folks and it was awesome to reunite with them in Vegas or, many of them ended up moving to SF later, but I think that's just like one of the most special things about Uber was like the people that you got to meet with and
the people all over the world and in every city. It's the best.
And just back to that, like the spark of like them just joining that rocket ship, like it didn't matter if it was in an apartment or if it was like in a Chicago office, like they felt so energized to like join this and it felt like we're changing the world. It really was such a special moment. I tell people like, money aside or whatever, Uber, like the most special thing about Uber was like the people currency that you got out of it and the relationships. And now, even starting my business, like being able to reach out to 100+ people since starting the company for, help or feedback or a referral or whatever it is has been really awesome.
If you look back, what are the couple of core learnings that you took from the Uber experience, especially as you think about being a founder now, and maybe even some of the, sort of executive level people that you interacted with, Travis, Dar, Andrew McDonald, Rafa Nakir at GoPuff?
Yeah. The biggest takeaway, and it's my number one cultural value in the company, is be an owner, not a renter. Like they instilled that into you. And it did feel like every decision you made had a real impact and like you had to think of it like as if you're an owner in the business. And you didn't know what that meant until like later when, a lot of people did cash out and do well at Uber. But I think that was like a big thing is just like everything that you do being an owner and having that mindset. And I think the other thing that, I have taken away, and it's also cultural values, the best idea comes from anywhere, from anyone. And that's what was really cool about Uber is like the trajectory is growing and you can grow with the trajectory of the business because, if you are able to go out and actually execute, what they cared more about was less about title, but more about impact. And so that's a lot of the, values that I want to, live by and kind of how my company operates today. And from a leadership perspective, I mean, like Travis had this aura, he had this aura that he just wasn't going to lose. And he was that guy, and just spending any time with him was amazing. But he was a visionary, and without directly talking to him every single day, you just felt that permeating like pressure of figuring out how to make it. And then you had other great leaders, in the business as well, from engineering to, his direct leadership, like Andrew McDonald, who just really cared about operational excellence and the customer experience and just like providing that best experience. And so that's just something that, is rooted in me. I am very fortunate in terms of like seeing the leadership at Uber from Travis to then Dara, and then leaving to go to GoPuff and seeing Rafa Nakir, just kind of getting the, the best of all of them and being able to try to guide my business that way.
All right. So now you run a business called Unicorn. You're the founder, you're the CEO. What is Unicorn to start? And then I want to get into the origin story.
The simplest way that I explain Unicorn is it's StockX, but for spirits and wine.
Okay. And but now you got to explain like it's my mom, because she has no idea
what StockX is.
Yeah. My mom's probably our number one listener, and she doesn't know what StockX is.
Yeah,
so,
and that was one of my favorite episodes too.
Thank you.
Your mom is a legend.
Shout out.
So Unicorn is a modern platform for spirits and wine. And so it's an app where customers can come and discover, buy, trade, sell, or vault, store their personal wine and spirits. And so, maybe the better example is it's eBay, but for spirits and wine. Spirits and wine is something that, during my time of traveling for Uber and GoPuff, that I became pretty obsessed with. I would love going into wine stores. I'd love sitting at the bar.
You get your sommelier certification.
Got my master somm level 1 and my WSET, 1 and 2. And I just kind of became obsessed with it. I never understood how someone could pick up a glass and I smoke cranberry and, cardboard and dirt. I just smell red wine. I just didn't get it, but I wanted to understand. And it was just a fun way to pass time. As I started getting into wine and spirits, it felt like there was no platform that made it easy. Similar to like Uber, clicking a button, getting that experience or getting the car or meal delivered to you. I wanted to create an app that made it really easy to go on it, discover, learn about wine and spirits, and then get that bottle and have it shipped to you or stored.
And there's already sort of things happening in the marketplace where for a long time, people have just stored wine and alcohol, right? I mean, people see it as a commodity, whatever, in sort of that way, an asset class. There are wine storage facilities around the United States. And then as well, there's maybe sort of this black market whiskey, Facebook marketplace, Craigslist trading happen as well. So people are sort of doing some of these activities already. They're analog. They're not fully digital.
It was an entirely offline business that I wanted to bring online. And so what's actually a fascinating stat is that 98% of alcohol transactions happen offline. And so when you think about, wine and spirits, you think Sotheby's and Christie's and, these auction houses that have been around for a century and they're truly archaic. And then when you think about storing wine, it's a little lockup storage that you walk in and you're shoving your cases in and then you're going on, a spreadsheet and typing in what you have, or, maybe you go on and put it on your notes app or something like that. But when you think about every other collectible, baseball cards or sports memorabilia, art, etc., that's all become digital. At this point, most of those sales are happening digitally. And so I was just fascinated. And, one recent stat that I saw is over 100 million bottles are sold every single day of wine and spirits, 100 million, but 98 million of those are offline. And so when you think about just human behavior of ordering, an Uber or getting groceries delivered by Amazon or Whole Foods or whatever it is, that seemed like a crazy idea until Instacart came along or until GoPuff came along. And still today, only 8% of food is delivered. And I think it's a massive market. It's $1 trillion a year industry. And there's no way that my kids or my generation is going to be buying wine and spirits the same way 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And you're already seeing that significant acceleration in growth. But historically, the wine and spirits industry is a difficult one to recruit tech talent into or recruit, the Uber profile of a person into. And so I think that that's what is, was difficult. There's really good wine and spirits people, but they're not good tech or operations people. And so I wanted to blend, my experience, my co-founder's experience of hospitality and tech and bring them together and build this modern platform where people can seamlessly buy, trade, sell, or store their collection.
Got it. But you have this vision, you have this idea, but you're still just some dude living in Chicago, living in New York, living in Chicago. So you decide the first thing I should do is buy a wine storage facility, which takes some big balls to even come up with that as an idea. Then, not only that, go and execute that. I mean, when you called me and told me you were doing this, I was like, you're the best, but you're also insane. How are you ever going to do this? How does that even start that you get into purchasing? And then there was 100,000 bottles in this facility, something insane like that. How does this go down?
Yeah. So I read this book that I read every year and I think it's pretty cheesy, but I love it. It's called Think and Grow Rich. And
rich Dad, Poor Dad, or whatever.
Yeah, it's literally one of those kind of books, and it's all about manifestation and building a plan. And so, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I felt like I didn't have that idea, or I didn't know what I wanted to go out and do. And then, as my time at GoPuff, one of the things that they had me do was be head of alcohol. And I was like, I don't know much about it. I don't know about the 3-tier system or anything like that, but I quickly learned. And at GoPuff, what I saw is that, 90% of the alcohol sales that we were doing were Casamigos and High Noons and White Claws and kind of lower tier stuff that's like ready to drink immediately. But we were acquiring all these liquor stores like Liquor Barn and Bevmo, and all of the Pappies and the rare spirits and wines was like this like hand-to-hand combat transaction in store. And you had to know someone, talk to the GM to get this thing. And I just thought that was weird. It's like, we're selling everything digitally, but like all this expensive stuff isn't selling.
And that's all on allocation. I mean, these liquor stores are basically getting small lots of anything that's higher end. And that somewhat creates the market for why these bottles are in demand.
Distribution is super inefficient. And so I remember there was like one moment that we were able to sell like 250 bottles of 1942, but like a Hawaii store had it, or like some like location where we weren't selling it. And so just like distribution was like super inefficient. But a lot of those pains, like as I was at Uber and I was buying wine or buying spirits and I said, hey, ship it to Chicago, because I lived in a tiny little studio here in New York. And so they're like, we can't ship to Chicago. And I was like, why? They're like, we can only do it once a month on the Thursday of the third month or of the third week. And then it goes on the special truck and then it gets there. And I'm like, that seems crazy too. And so I already felt some of the inefficiencies of sending wine and buying wine and how that industry worked. And so I basically reached out to 10 of the biggest collectors that I knew. And I had one ask for them, which was, can you introduce me to 10 other collectors? And I had this goal of, I want to interview 100 wine or spirits collectors and just understand what their pain points are. And so I asked them how they buy, how they store, how they ship. And everyone had the same feedback of just, it's so antiquated. There's this website or there's Sotheby's, and then you have to get a third party broker to actually get it to ship. And then it goes to my storage place and then I have to log it. And so I remember asking someone to mock up a prototype on Figma of like what the collector dash would look like. And I said, what if your collection looked like this? And in every single meeting, it was like, hey, here's the iPad. What if you can see your entire collection? And I just saw everyone's eyes open. They're like, whoa. And I said, and click here. And it was a clickable prototype. And I was like, now request your bottle. Now you're having dinner at Carbone. You want it shipped here. Now you're traveling somewhere. Do you want this case shipped here? And they're like, if you can do that, that would be incredible. And they're like, something like that doesn't exist and it needs to exist. For me, the idea was, okay, I could launch this platform where people can buy, trade, and sell. But I was like, the supply is in storage facilities. It's in people's houses. It's kind of everywhere. And so why don't I meet the customers where they are? And so the original thesis was, if I can acquire these storage facilities. And so I'd actually have these collectors take me around to their storage units and I would see how they're cataloging, how they're getting stuff shipped in. And I toured about 50 facilities across the country. And it was the same in every single one. It was just a little, cedar cellar and then a little key and a lock. They would have to go down, put it in there. And I was like, I can't believe that this guy is wasting his time doing that. The original vision was, I'm going to acquire a wine storage facility to start, digitize people's collections in this facility. I was going after a handful. The one that ended up working out was this one in Chicago that you came to see. It's actually one of the largest storage facilities in the country and has capacity for up to 1 million bottles. And I remember the first thing that we did was digitize everyone's wines, launch a portal, give them access to this client portal so that they can see everything digitally. I knew I wasn't going to win them over on having the best marketplace immediately or having any of that, but I can respond really fast. We can have a better software and tech than anyone, and we have better operations than anyone. And so once we could win them over on managing and servicing their collection, the next thing is the marketplace, because the idea was that Max has his locker here, Phil has his locker here, but Phil wants some of the wine that's in Max's, but he doesn't know Max. And how do you start creating this like inter-network trading? And that's kind of how Unicorn evolved.
And then you get in touch with guys that had started a marketplace.
Yep.
And maybe just give me the quick glimpse of how they got started and then how the whole deal comes together.
So we launched the storage facility, which at the time was called Vintage. And we had really great traction and are getting hundreds of customers. And everything was purely word of mouth and referral. Hey, look at my collection on my phone. And this guy's like, oh my God, I'm still doing that. He's like, I can request a bottle to be delivered today. And this guy's like, I have to, schlep an hour to go get the case and rummage through hundreds of bottles to find what I want. We already had a great business. And so then the idea was, how do we expand that to multiple locations. And a mutual investor said, hey, like you guys should go meet with Cody, who's, founder of this company. And they are a year and a half ahead of us. And they started a marketplace for spirits. And they felt a lot of the pain points buying and selling spirits and how legacy auction houses worked and how slow payment terms were, et cetera. And so I came to meet them and they were basically in a WeWork type space. And then they had a little basement storage with thousands of bottles. And they would drive this Sprinter van across the country picking up, or they were going to restaurants and liquidating restaurants of supply and then putting it on the platform. They had a third-party app and some traction. And so we met, and I just remember telling them my vision and their vision. And I said, my vision is to have the modern platform for spirits and wine. What's yours? And they're like, it's to build this modern platform. And I said, the modern platform from my learnings at Uber and GoPuff is to be fully vertically integrated. You need the storage, you need the logistics, and you need the marketplace so that you can create this end-to-end customer experience where they buy, they sell, they have storage. And it becomes cyclical where, people who buy can seamlessly store, people who are storing can seamlessly sell. And if they're buying at any store or whatever, we can pick up and manage their collection and it's all in one place. And they're like, well, it seems like we have the same vision. Like, let's do this together. Like, what would that look like? And I said, let me get back to you. And I was trying to play it cool because I really did love what they were doing, but it was super early stage what they were doing and very scrappy. And so, 6 months later, we basically came to terms on a deal. But within those 6 months, what we started doing is feeding our supply of people that are storing with us and asking them to use the third-party platform that they were on. And they had a really great experience. So they're already seeing millions of dollars flowing in from our customers that are storing with us and selling their platform. And then people that are buying are asking for storage. And so we were already operating in good faith as if we were going to merge the companies. And so we ended up acquiring them, merging the businesses. And then today that's known as Unicorn.
And what does the business look like today, like numbers wise? So give us some of the
yes,
highlights.
The business has been around for 4 years. Last year we did 50 million in sales. Lifetime we've done 150 million in sales. And this year we've already surpassed total sales, bottles, number of bids, et cetera, compared to last year, just this year. So the business has, grown astronomically from when it launched. Our first year, we did 900,000 in sales. And then this year, we're going to do about 80 million in sales. And I think the other really unique thing, unlike, Uber and GoPuff, where it was growth at all costs and spending money to acquire customers, we've grown to over 100,000 customers organically. And I think the really awesome shift too is from when we started the business and all the initial collectors were, older folks, 60s, 70s. But if you look at 2025, 70% of our spend is coming from Gen Z and millennials. And that growth has just been astronomical. And so we really have grown, every week we get about 1,000 organic customers signing up to use the platform and thousands of sellers. And, we've done $150 million in sales in a short period of time. But what's really amazing is it's kind of created this Uber-like economy where it's $150 million going into the pockets of consigners. And 50% of those consigners were first-time sellers last quarter. And so this is just becoming a thing where people are going on Unicorn, walking into a store, scanning a bottle, seeing what it's worth, and being able to trade or arbitrage in real time. And we've worked with, restaurants and retailers and people's personal collections. I'd like to say that it's life-changing for some people, whether it's death, divorce, they're paying for surgery. For others, they're just making money so that they can buy, groceries for the week. But it is really cool to be able to see that impact and that money flowing into people's pockets every single week.
Dude, so impressive. I love every time I talk about this business. What was like one of the first aha product market fit magic moments? I mean, I know you had somebody that was selling $1 million worth of alcohol in Los Angeles. I mean, what were some of the early moments where you're like, holy shit, this is working?
Yeah, I think there was 2 moments. The first one was an existing storage client and said he had some spirits and said he wanted to sell $100,000 worth. He was opening up like a new restaurant concept. And we get to his house, and that was going to be one of the largest consignments ever. I mean, because the business did 900,000 the previous year.
And they have one guy with $100,000 worth of alcohol that he's ready to move.
Yep. And so we get to his house, and there's a box of 3 23-year Pappy decanters, which those Pappy Van Winkle decanters, and those bottles are each like $35,000, $40,000 at the time. Cody, my co-founder, grabs the box, and it's freshly sealed with a 3-pack. And mind you, he paid $4,500 for all 3. that's just what the, bourbon was. Like this example, this bottle of Glenfarclas is a one of 121 bottles. This bottle sells for upwards of like $7-8 grand. This was like a $200 bottle, or that Wild Turkey was $15 and is now selling for $2,000.
Wait, how much?
That was $15 in 1990.
$15 in 1990.
And now it's $2,000.
Now worth $2,000.
And so we get to this guy's house.
I mean, this is like about as much as my first car, my first Honda Civic.
Absolutely crazy. But we get to this guy's house and Cody grabs the three and he's like, so that's it? And he has on the floor scattered thousands of bottles. And I was like, I think we should take everything. I was like, no pressure to sell. We're going to store it for you. Let us do
He's got it in his house.
He's got it in his house, and he has 2 kids running around doing pop-a-shot. They have like a little slide downstairs, and the bottles are just scattered all over the floor, fully sealed. And I was like, dude, you probably have $1 million worth of bottles here. I was like, do you have a list so that we can like appraise it? He's like, I haven't done any inventory. I was like, tell you what, let us take those 3 bottles and then take the rest and we'll digitize everything for you. Put it in your storage, and then you'll see the value and have everything appraised. And I remember we came back, listed those 3 bottles immediately that Sunday. And then the following Sunday, the auction ended. And the way our business works, it's every single Sunday, an auction ends at 6 p.m. It's 100% sell through in every single auction. And then we pay someone 7 days later. We paid him out, got the 100 grand. And then he saw his other list and it was worth like 1.1. And he's like, dude, my cost basis on this was like 75 grand for everything. He's been collecting over 13 years. And so he's like, you know what? Put in another 250, put in another 100, and slowly start chipping away. And that was like a really big moment, but that was also like a storage client who converted to a buyer. And then, the buyer then who started buying stuff said, hey, store some of this for me. And so truly we got to see the flywheel. And so that was one moment. And the biggest moment was Guy Ronnie was one of our earliest consigners. And he's like, I have a list. I want to sell some stuff. I'm going to send you the list. I've actually inventoried everything. He thought it was worth $100,000. We did the list and it was $1 million. I was like, guys, let's do it again. Let's make sure it's really accurate. Like, it would suck if we sold this thing and it, didn't hit $1 million. We did it again. And it was like, no, we're being super conservative with our estimates. I think it's $1 million. Come back to him and he goes, if you can get me $1 million, take everything right now. We took everything. And that year we jumped from 900,000 in sales to 9 million. And so the jump was just astronomical. And that's where you really started feeling some growth pains and really needed to ramp up the process. Once you started doing these sales of, $1 million in an auction, or every single week where we were hitting like, $500,000, like really high. And people were like, wow, look at these payouts. Look what's happening. And then people are like, I have that bottle and I paid this much for it. I have that bottle. And so organically we start getting all these inbounds. And today, I was telling you earlier, but we're getting about 500 inbounds every single week. 100% of our business is inbound. We spend relatively no money on paid marketing.
These are 500 people that are inquiring about selling on the platform every week.
A single bottle, could be 10 bottles, could be a bottle that was gifted to them for the holidays of a Dom Perignon, or could be, a massive collection. And so I think that anyone who bought pre-COVID is like well in the money. And if you bought, in the early 2000s, there's a chance it's 6 figures worth of bottles if you were able to hold on to that. And no one was buying at the time to be like, this is an investment. I think that it just, kind of became speculative and people became hoarders because collectors are a little bit eccentric.
I mean, how does someone even get started doing this? When someone comes to you and is like, oh, I'd love to like get in the mix on this, or start buying wine or spirits, and is there still opportunity? Is there still going to be growth? Yeah, if I bought it in 2000, of course it's going to be worth more. But what does that kind of look like today?
Well, 2 things. One, I always joke, but I say it becomes a passion that turns into a problem, or they say I have a problem. I'm like, no, you're just really passionate, just to not make them feel
it's fine. Just keep buying more.
Yeah. I think if you collect anything, like really collect, whether you're a baseball card collector, comic book, records, like they're just interesting people. And the passion sector is one of the most fun spaces I've ever been a part of, because if you collect one thing, you collect multiple things. And then you get into the mindset of the collector. And that's actually one like part of our business that we're starting to do, which is called the Unicorn Review. And we're launching something called the Collector's Corner, just to understand like, how did you get started? Why? And so there's not one silver lining of like how someone got started or why someone got started. For someone, this is a drink that they had with their grandpa and then they wanted to find something else, and they want to find something else, and they keep buying. For others, it's people like me who are traveling and, just slowly got addicted to buying bottles and wanting to collect them all like Pokemon. But I actually really don't love when people say, what do I buy now that will appreciate? Because we're not an investment platform. And I was just on Fox and they just kept pushing. So you're an investment platform. You're an investment platform. I'm like, no, we're for everyone. What's actually amazing is this year we're going to do 100,000 transactions under $100. That's not an investment. People can speculate and they can make money. But at the end of the day, this is a consumable. It's meant to be enjoyed. And there are people that buy well and, can arbitrage what a retail price for a Pappy Van Winkle 10-year is like $70. And then you put it on the platform at $600. Great. You got lucky, you make money, but it's also meant to be enjoyed and shared. And so I think the majority of customers are consuming. But when people ask me that question, where do I start? What do I buy? My question is, what do you like? Do you like scotch? Do you like whiskey? Do you like tequila? Do you like wine? And then we get into kind of, what they like. And then what I encourage people to do is just buy multiple of things like within a price point that they're comfortable. So if it's wine, you can go on and buy a Côte d'Aron for $20. You can buy a Chateauneuf de Pape. You could buy, a Côte Rôtie. You could buy all the way to, some crazy Burgundy. But I think what I encourage people is don't fast track immediately to the most expensive stuff. Understand the palette of what you like. And then slowly, start building up a collection. And so, yeah, the community is massive. Like I said, like over 100 million bottles every single day are bought and sold. I'm going to have to treat you to something really special.
Okay.
This is a Glenfarclas family cask. This is a 38-year-old whiskey from your birth year, 1969, which is pretty cool.
That's a lie. 1986.
This bottle is one of one.
Wait, it's actually 38 years old?
Huh? 38 years old.
So that's me.
That's your actual age?
Yeah,
that's
38.
Amazing. Yeah, that's why I brought it.
You did give me 1986 for my birthday 2 years ago.
That was so awesome. I actually think that that's what really makes wine and spirits cool too, is drinking your birth year wines.
Dude, you gave me that idea and I've used that for like wedding gifts and birthday gifts and stuff. It's so cool to be able to go on and say, it's somebody's 30th birthday, 40th birthday, 50th birthday, getting them a bottle from that year. It stands out.
And that's actually like how we've gotten so many customers too. I'm looking for something epic. It's like when someone's really successful or does really well and has everything that they want, you can get everything. But getting that birth year bottle of like, man, that's so cool. I was born on that year. It's like, time travel. Or you can drink something from the 60s. And, so this bottle was about probably $200, which is actually crazy to pay $200 for a bottle in 2007. But it was in the cask for 38 years. And so today this bottle is about $7,000 to $8,000, upwards of $10,000 in some auctions. But I want to give us a little pour.
All right, let's try it.
Make the a little bit more fun.
Was it damaged or anything, or you just got your hands on it?
Yeah, we have an awesome archive of bottles that we use for events, etc. And so I think we're in the business of hospitality and getting people to enjoy bottles. So we do have an archive of bottles that we use for a lot of events.
This is the first time drinking on the show, so I'm popping my drinking cherry.
Cheers.
Cheers. Love you, brother. It's a unicorn. Smooth.
Super smooth. And so you look at this is 25 years old. Look at the color on that. Then you look at the color on this.
Yeah, so dark.
So dark. This is,
for our listeners, probably really, really riveting to hear us talk about this.
Yeah. But I think that's what makes it cool, is being able to try 3 different bottles, 3 different expressions from the 90s, from the 60s, from the early 2000s. This set called the Millennium Spring Bank, 6 bottles. It was released in 2000, Y2K. And there's a 25 year, 30 year, 35 year. It's 25 all the way up to 50 years, 6 bottles. So if you get the full set, that's a $50,000 set. But that cost $2,000 when it came out. And for the folks that actually held on to those collections, we recently sold one for roughly $50,000.
Insane. Dude, one of the most amazing things about you have such exquisite taste in everything you do. You've got a unicorn, awesome shirt on. You got unicorn shoes. I visited the facility. It's so thoughtfully designed. It's beautiful. It's so cool. There's a quadrillion bottles there. You have a machine that is figuring out what box to make for them, automatically making boxes to ship them out. You have a production team you ingest every bottle that you sell physically. So you guys are authentication, make sure it's real, pictures of it, posting the listing. I mean, it's really a tremendous operation. I give you just insane credit for what you guys are building.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of learnings from Uber and GoPuff of just like, how do you make it better every single day? And, there's no way the business can scale to this many customers, this many people, et cetera, at the volumes that we're doing without trying to innovate and iterate every single day. And I appreciate the compliment of the style and taste. Like, I do really appreciate great branding. And I look at, some of the best companies in the world, the Airbnbs, the Ubers, the StockXs of the world, and everything that they do is just so tasteful. And I think that your brand, as I was going through the branding exercise, I was like, we might not be $1 billion company, but I want to feel like $1 billion company.
And act like one.
I
love it. And if people can they come visit you in Chicago?
We love hosting people, always popping bottles and letting them taste great stuff. And yeah, very welcome to come to Chicago. And hospitality is our number one core value in the business. So would love to host anyone that comes through.
Oh, so cool. Well, easily one of the fast growing companies in Chicago and probably nationwide. So hell yeah. And I'm a proud investor. So
let's go.
Shout out. All right. Lightning round to close out. I'm going to hit you with some quick questions. Give me what comes to mind. Favorite bottle of wine?
Quintarelli. It's an Italian wine. My favorite producer.
What year, if you were like one bottle?
I mean, my birth year, I think would be cool. 1991. But really, anytime you can get your hands on that, it's one of my favorite Italian producers.
What's that bottle run, you think?
It varies, anywhere from $100 up to $1,000. There's, a variety of Quintarellis, but I think it's just nearly impossible to get. So when you can get your hands on it, I try to buy as much as I can.
A favorite bottle of whiskey?
Favorite bottle of whiskey is Wild Turkey right there. Cheesy gold foil for my birth year in 1991. Also $20 bottle that now is close to $2,000. But I love that. They don't make whiskey like that anymore. Back then, whiskey didn't sell. And so the fact that it's around now and I could drink a birth year bottle of something that's, truly amazing like that is one of my favorite things to do.
Most impactful unicorn investor?
I'd say George Boussis, like one of our lead investors. He believed in it. He started a business called Raise. He went through the highs, the lows of it, and he believed in it when it was just an idea and been super supportive ever since. And then, it also sounds crazy, but I had 100 people on my cap table when I raised the initial $5 million. And the reason I did that is because it felt amazing to have people like you or others who have put in 10,000, 25,000 into the round, but are so helpful in every single way, whether it's, hey, I want a bottle for this person. It's their birth year. I'm trying to get a gift for this person. I've had other great investors like Carmelo Anthony, who's been super supportive and just like awesome to collaborate with him on his wine and his brand. But yeah, I think other founders like George who have kind of gone through it and helped a ton through the growth phase of the business.
Favorite city plus restaurant for a glass of wine?
I think New York. I mean, being here, it was funny. I texted my wife, like, this is the most, other than France, like has the most wine bars in the world. But I think like the energy of the city, you can't replicate it. And I was just walking down, like Times Square, which sounds crazy to come back and walk through Times Square. But I'm like, I love it.
So do I. I hate
the dude who's Spider-Man.
Dude, I love like throwing the pods on, walking around Times Square. I'm like, this is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Where else does this exist in the world? The haters. Times Square rocks.
The center of the universe.
Center of the universe. All right. Second last one. I have two. First non-alcohol product that Unicorn will sell.
Experiences.
Going to a wine tasting,
Not even a wine tasting, or I think that, something money can't buy is experiences. And so if you can get access to a really incredible experience and auction it off, and we've done it and it has been more wine and spirit centric, but I think like, having a dinner with your favorite NBA player or going out to a yoga class with, I don't know, pop star that you love, something like that. Another category that I'm obsessed with is like vintage memorabilia, vintage books, like the first edition of Harry Potter and other collectibles like that are a moment in time in history. So I think those are other categories that we're exploring and that we're pretty excited about.
And then last one piece of advice for some other kid who's a hustler, sales guy, gal, whatever, but wants to be a CEO one day.
I think the idea is one thing. Execution is the only strategy that matters. Everyone has ideas. And I think how you execute and just being able to build off of momentum every single day is the most important thing. And the next thing is just turning no's into a yes. Your job in life is to literally turn no's into a yes and to make whatever you want happen.
Dude, hell yeah. You're the man. Thank you so much.
You're the man.
Cheers to Unicorn.
Cheers.